The twin suns of Virelia 7 were dipping behind jagged rock spires, painting the desert world in rich golds and fading crimson. Inside the cockpit of a half-wrecked assault cruiser, two fugitives sat shoulder to shoulder in stubborn silence. And by alien princess and a Terran soldier. Commander Jareth Miles adjusted the cracked control panel, wiping off a layer of dust and dried blood. His armor, still scorched from their recent escape, creaked as he leaned back with a grin playing on his lips. Across from him sat the reason he'd nearly died 5 times in the last 12 hours. She was stunning in the kind of way that made you forget how lethal she was. Skin like burnished bronze, silver white hair braided with tech strands, and black eyes that gleamed like obsidian blades. Her emerald green exosuit clung to her form like living armor, and yet it wasn't the suit that made Jareth catch his breath every time he looked at her. Her name, at least the one she gave to the galaxy, was Velitharian of House Cerne, a princess of the Zenari Protectorate, a diplomatic enforcer, and heir to one of the most influential alien bloodlines in the galactic systems. To Terrans, that title sounded like trouble with a capital laser cannon. "You owe me your name," Jareth said, voice teasing as he stretched his legs out and crossed his arms. "Or do Zenari royals skip introductions after being rescued from certain death?" She didn't look at him right away. Her gaze was fixed on the sunset outside the viewport, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "If you guess my real name," she replied, "I'll marry you." That pulled a blink from him. "Wait, what?" Now she turned her head slowly, her face a portrait of cool confidence. "You heard me. That's the tradition on my homeworld. If someone outside your caste guesses your true name, the old laws bind you. Permanently. You're saying I'd be stuck." "With you if I guessed your name," he grinned. "That sounds like a dream." "It would be a death sentence," she said, amused. "For both of us." He leaned forward. "So what you're saying is, you're betting your entire future that I'm too dumb to get it right." "Exactly." Her smirk deepened. "And my future is extremely safe." The cockpit filled with a low chuckle. Jareth wasn't sure if she was serious. With Vel, it was always a dance between truth and games, affection and tactics. But the challenge had been made, and he'd never back down from a fight, especially not one involving her. He remembered the first time he saw her. It was on Alarian Prime, during the siege. His squad had been obliterated, and he'd woken up alone and dying. She was the one who'd pulled him from the rubble and stabilized him while negotiating hostage releases and threatening orbital bombardments in the same breath. The galaxy called her a politician. He knew better. She was a warrior, a strategist, a woman who didn't give out her trust or her heart easily. Now, 6 months later, they were on the run together, after an operation gone sideways, a stolen star map, and a betrayal inside the Protectorate. They barely made it off Zynar Delta with their lives, and now sat grounded, hiding in a desert canyon with enemies closing in. He'd risked his life again to pull her out. She hadn't asked for it. He'd done it anyway. "Do you actually want to get married?" he asked suddenly, watching her. She glanced sideways, one silvery brow raised. "Is that your way of guessing?" "Nope. Just wondering how you'd look in Terran white. Probably covered in someone else's blood. Hot." That made her laugh. The real kind. The one he only heard when her guard dropped. It was a small victory. In a universe where most days they just tried to survive. They didn't speak for a while. The ship creaked and groaned in the cooling air. Beyond the ridge, the signal of approaching mercenary raiders started blinking on their scanners. Exiled scum, opportunists chasing the bounty on Vel's head, and likely Jareth's too, by association. She stood, sealing up her gauntlets with a hiss of nanolocks. "Looks like story time's over." Jareth checked his carbine. "Any particular plan for not dying tonight?" "Yes, you do what I say and maybe I won't feed you to them." "Romantic. Everything is with me." They fought together like fire and fury. Raiders poured into the canyon, weapons crackling, ships howling over the ridges. Jareth stormed forward with calculated fury, drawing attention and cutting down foes with clean precision. Vel moved like wind, blades singing, her armor a blur of green and gold under starlight. They were a unit, back to back, anticipating each other's movements, never hesitating. When it was done, when the sand stopped burning and the last of the enemies lay crumpled on the dunes, Vel's chest heaved. With exhaustion, her blade dripped with alien blood. Jareth stood next to her, covered in bruises and dust, a wild grin plastered on his face. "You fight like one of my people," she said softly, brushing hair from her eyes. "You love like one of mine," he replied, without thinking. She went still. He saw her mouth part slightly, her breath catch. But then she turned away before he could see what was in her eyes. That night, as they repaired the outer shielding of the cruiser, Jareth sat beside her on the hull looking up at the stars. She sat silently, knees drawn up to her chest, her expression unreadable. "Vel," he said gently, "tell me your name." She didn't look at him. Not the one they use in court. The real one. The one you were given when you were born. There was a long pause. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because I want to see your face when I get it right." Her laugh was soft, sad this time. "You won't. No one ever has. That's why I joke about the vow. Because it can never happen. I'm not no one." She turned then, eyes sharp but conflicted. "No," she whispered. "You're far more dangerous." And the moment hung there, suspended between stars and silence, with something ancient and powerful stirring beneath it. The next morning the cruiser's system screamed warnings into the still air. Power reserves were almost drained. Atmospheric shielding flickered in and out. Jareth groaned as he rolled off the cold metal floor, his bruises from the battle demanding attention. Vel was already up, crouched near the holomap interface with a focused expression, silver hair spilling over one armored shoulder. "Repairs bought us time," she said without turning around. "Not safety." Jareth blinked away sleep. "We'll make it work." "You always say that," Vel replied. "One of these days the galaxy's going to prove you wrong." He moved to the pilot's console and pulled up the local nav grid. "Not today." His grin was there, despite everything. They had 3 hours before the next orbital sweep by Zinari bounty ships. The desert world they'd landed on, Core's Edge, was barely a dust mote on any official map. But the planet's storms hid ships, and fugitives better than any cloaking tech. And if the scavenger outpost they picked up on long-range scan still had its black market network, they might find a new energy core for the jump drive. "You're quiet," Jareth said, after a long pause. Vel didn't answer. He leaned against the edge of the console. "Still thinking about the name?" "I'm thinking about the consequences." He crossed his arms. "That I might guess it? Or that you might want me to?" This time she did look up. Her dark eyes held something more than challenge, uncertainty, fear, maybe hope. "You shouldn't want this," she said. Too late. They headed toward the outpost on foot, cloaked by heat distortion and natural cover. Vel led with her scanner active, her stride confident and graceful, Jareth behind her, hand on his sidearm. The closer they got to the outpost, the more tense she became. He saw her fingers twitch at her weapon. She kept glancing at the shadows. Something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Zinari tech shouldn't be here." "I'm picking up encrypted pulses, same frequency as my people's hunting relays." "You think they're already here?" "No. I think they've been here for a while." The outpost was buried inside a crater wall, half camouflaged with junked parts and tattered sails flapping in the dry wind. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but Jareth's instinct said otherwise. He motioned to Vel, and together they crept inside. Inside was a maze of rusted corridors, dark alcoves and crates stacked with scavenged goods. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional hiss of distant machinery. Jareth took point, Vel covering the rear. Then he froze. Voices, Zinari. They ducked behind a container, just as two tall figures in silver-plated armor walked past, their glowing visors sweeping the area. Vel's breathing hitched, her body stiffened. "They're from House Yakala," she whispered, barely audible. "My family's rivals. If they catch us, they won't imprison us. They'll make an example." Jareth reached out, his hand brushing hers briefly. "Then we don't get caught." They moved with silence and precision, but the outpost was a trap. As they entered what should have been the energy core chamber, an energy net sprang from the floor and ceiling, catching Vel in a burst of blue lightning. She screamed as the voltage slammed into her body, dropping to one knee. "Vel!" Jareth leapt toward her, drawing his pulse rifle and unloading a barrage at the emitter nodes. Sparks flew. The net fizzled, but not before 3 armored Zinari stormed into the room. Jareth was fast enough to take out one before the others reached him. The fight was brutal. Punches, blasts, blades. One guard knocked Jareth's rifle away. Another tried to stab him, but Vel, her body still shuddering from the net's aftershock, drove her knife up under his helmet from the ground. Blood sprayed. By the time it was over, both of them were bleeding. Panting, armor scorched and cracked. Vel pulled herself to her feet with difficulty. Jareth handed her his sidearm. "You good?" "I'm still breathing." "Then we're not done yet." They grabbed what they could, an energy core, rations, fresh power cells, and set the outpost to overload. As they ran back through the canyon, the outpost exploded behind them, the shockwave pushing them to the ground. Dust billowed into the air, blotting out the suns. For a while they just lay there, coughing, battered, alive. "You still want to guess my name?" Vel asked softly, her voice hoarse. He looked at her. "I don't want to guess. I want you to trust me with it." She didn't respond for a long time. Then, slowly, she sat up. "There was a girl once," she began, "born with a forbidden name. One her mother whispered only once before she died. A name hidden from the court, from the enemies of her house. A name that meant hope in shadow." Jareth watched her, stunned. She kept that name locked away. Because if the wrong people found out, they could use it to destroy her. "You," Jareth said. "They could destroy you." Vel nodded. "But if I said it," he trailed off, "she'd be bound. And the war between hearts and empires would begin." "I'd fight it," he said without hesitation. "For her, for you." She looked at him then with something like sorrow. Even if it meant going against the galaxy. Especially then. Suddenly, alarms blared on their communicator. Orbiting ships were dropping fast. Dozens. No more time. They scrambled to their ship, installed the new core, and began liftoff. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky behind them. As they broke the atmosphere, Jareth turned to her. "One more chance," he said. "If I guess, you're mine." She smiled, sad and dangerous. "You only get one try." He stared into her eyes, thought about the way she moved, the way she fought, the way she held back her pain like a secret blade. Then he said it. Her expression shattered. The stars beyond them swirled in silence. He had guessed right. She stared at him, frozen in disbelief, jaw trembling. "How?" And outside half the Protectorate's warfleet locked onto their signal. "Because," he said quietly, "you told me when you didn't think I was listening." The silence inside the cockpit was total, except for the shrieking proximity alarms and the deafening thrum of the overloaded engines. But even with all of that, all Jareth could hear was her name echoing in his mind. Zarin.Vel, no, Zarin, stared at him as if he had peeled away the armor she wore, not just on her body, but around her soul. Her pupils were wide, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but couldn't summon words. The stars outside shimmered like fireflies above a battlefield. Beneath them, the Zenari fleet tightened its noose. You. How did you know? She finally whispered. Jareth kept his hands steady on the controls. It wasn't just what you said. It was the way you hesitated every time I called you by a different name. And that night at the fire, when you looked up at the sky and muttered something. In your sleep, she went pale. I spoke it. Only once. Just once. Zarin sank into the co-pilot's chair, every bit of false bravado stripped away. Do you understand what you've done? Jareth gave a humorless smile. Yeah. Apparently, I just married an alien princess. She covered her face with one gloved hand. You invoked the binding rite, an ancient vow, the kind that not even bloodshed can undo. That name isn't just mine. It's an oath, a key. My house will come for you. My enemies will come for me. And the galaxy will come for us both. Outside, the warships began pursuit. Then we run faster, Jareth said simply. The chase that followed was brutal. Zarin rerouted all non-essential power to shields, while Jareth pulled every trick he knew from his days as a mercenary pilot. They barrel-rolled through asteroid debris, burst into low orbit over an ice moon, and blasted through a freighter, corridor so narrow it scraped paint off their hull. Despite the chaos, they worked together flawlessly, like two parts of a machine forged in battle. You're insane, she yelled over the noise as plasma streaked across their viewport. And, married apparently. Jareth grinned as he banked hard, dodging a homing torpedo by inches. They finally made the jump, the stars stretching into threads of light as the FTL drive kicked in. In the silence that followed, they collapsed in their seats, panting. Then Jareth looked over at her. You okay, Zarin? She didn't flinch at the name this time. Instead, she leaned her head back and closed her eyes. You've set off something unstoppable. My people have been waiting for generations to see if the binding could be reawakened. They believed the prophecy was dead. Let me guess, Jareth said. I'm part of the prophecy? She opened her eyes again. Not you. The one who guessed. He blinked. Seriously? She nodded. The prophecy said, when her name is spoken by one born of a dying sun, the tide shall turn, and love shall forge war and peace alike. Jareth gave her a long look. Your ancestors had a flair for the dramatic. That, or they saw this coming. They dropped out of FTL, into an uncharted system, an old smuggler's graveyard orbiting a collapsed star. The field was littered with derelict warships, a perfect hiding spot. Jareth maneuvered the cruiser into the shadow of a broken Draxan dreadnought. Here, at least for a moment, they were safe. They sat together in the dim cockpit, lit only by flickering systems. The adrenaline had faded, and the truth hung between them like a gravity well. You never expected me to guess it, Jareth said quietly. No, she admitted. But part of you hoped I would. She turned toward him, her voice softer than ever before. It wasn't a test. It was a defense. A shield. If you got it wrong, I could laugh. If you got it right, I would have no more excuses. He reached across the console and took her hand. She didn't pull away. This changes everything, she murmured. I was supposed to return to Zenari space, challenge the ruling houses, reclaim my birthright, alone. You still can, just not alone. She looked down at their joined hands. Do you know what the binding does? He shook his head. It links us, not just by name or law, but through our minds, our senses. If I'm wounded, you'll feel it. If you die, so will I. Jareth was quiet for a moment. Then, well, I better get better at not dying then. A small smile tugged at her lips, but their quiet moment was shattered by the ship's emergency systems lighting up in crimson. They found us? Jareth asked, already moving to the controls. No. Zarin narrowed her eyes at the display. This isn't Zenari tech. They brought it on screen. An old Human Alliance vessel, one of the deep-range Black Ops cruisers thought lost during the Solar Rebellion, was limping toward them. Its hull was torn open, no weapons charged, no shields, but a distress beacon screamed from it on every channel. Jareth's brow furrowed. That ship was lost 30 years ago. Then who's piloting it? They boarded cautiously, weapons ready. The derelict was eerily silent. Inside, they found something worse than a trap. They found children, dozens of them, alien and human, kept in cryochambers, some barely stable. Slave children, survivors of some twisted trade route, forgotten. I know this operation, Zarin whispered. My uncle funded it during the Unification War. He used children as collateral for peace deals. Jareth stared at the frozen faces. We can't leave them here. No, we can't. Together they hauled power cores and oxygen recyclers, rerouting systems to stabilize the ship. It took hours, every ounce of energy they had left. But when it was done, the children were safe. Still sleeping, but safe. As they stood by the largest cryopod, Zarin looked at him and asked, "Why do this? You could have run. We had our chance." "Because this is what you would have done," he said. "And I'm not walking into your war pretending. I don't know who you are." Her breath caught. Outside the ship, Zenari beacons began to appear on long-range scans. But something else did too. A fleet. Not Zenari, not Alliance, a third force. And they were headed straight for them. Jareth looked. At the signal. "That's not a patrol." "No," Zarin said. "That's a wedding party." He blinked. "Come again." "The ancient binding ritual. It sends a signal to the keepers. It's how alliances used to be announced. And they're responding. So, we're not just married," he muttered. "We're about to start a war." "Or end one," she said. Jareth met her eyes. "We do this together." They stood side by side on the bridge, watching the stars boil with the heat of approaching fleets. It was no longer just about survival, it was about destiny. The stars outside the viewport blazed with movement, ships blinking into existence one after the other. Sleek white vessels bearing the insignia of the Keepers, living relics from a forgotten galactic era. They moved with the grace of myth, not machine. Organic hulls, wings like mirrored crescent moons, weapons that shimmered like lightning captured in crystal. Zarin's voice was low, but charged with tension. "That's the 7th flame-bearing. Armada. My mother's personal fleet." Jareth leaned against the console. "I thought she was dead." "She is," Zarin said grimly. "Which means someone's trying to resurrect more than just tradition." Before they could respond, the Zenari fleet burst into real space with a crack of gravity and light. Brutal in design, the Zenari warships were all jagged metal, brute engines and shields that shimmered blood red. Behind them, a monstrous carrier, with a glowing crest, House Tyriel's flagship, eclipsed a dwarf moon, and between the two fleets, the derelict child ship floated like a candle between giants. "We need to get them out of here," Jareth muttered, eyes darting across the tactical readout. "No time," Zarin said, her fingers racing across her control screen. "They're waking." The cryopods aboard the old Alliance vessel were blinking green, life signs stabilizing. The children were waking, hearts thudding against glass, eyes wide and dazed. The ship's weak power core couldn't sustain them for long. "They'll die if caught in the crossfire," she said. Jareth cursed under his breath. "We can't move them. We can't shield them. So we make them the center." "What?" "We don't fight for ourselves," he said. "We fight for them. Make the kids the focus, the cause. Let every sensor out there see what this war is really about." She stared at him. "That's a very human thing to say. And you married me, remember?" he said with a crooked smile. Yaren tapped into the Zainari and Keeper channels. Her voice rang through space like a blade drawn in silence. "This is Princess Zarin of House Tyriel. Bound by name to the human Jareth Velian, we invoke the right of reckoning. The old laws bind your weapons. Any who fire without hearing the claim shall be cursed by the flame-bearer's judgment and the searing court. A moment of pure stillness followed. Then, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath, the two fleets stopped. Saerin turned to Jareth. That bought us 3 minutes. That's more than I expected. They transmitted the full ship logs, video feeds of the cryo chambers, images of the children's faces, data on Zainari war crimes long buried. Jareth added recordings of Zaren's confessions, and the moment she accepted the binding in silence, everything went out. Nothing held back. They exposed it all to every fleet captain, to every ancient keeper adjudicator, to every scout and drone watching from orbit. Let the galaxy see. Outside, the armadas hovered like vultures held at bay by fire. Then a third signal arrived. Neither Zinari nor Keeper. A single battered freighter, painted in human colors, broadcasting on every civilian channel. The Ambrosia, Jareth breathed. That's a refugee ship. They must have heard the transmissions, and behind it, dozens more. Civilian freighters. Merchant vessels, former slave haulers, even stolen pirate ships, all broadcasting one message. We stand for the children. Across the fleets, hesitation rippled. Then something unexpected happened. The lead Keeper ship, a silvered ark with a name, burned into galactic record. The Seraphine's oath, broadcast a declaration. Let the old sins end. Let blood no longer pay for silence. We recognize the binding. We recognize the right of claim. We name Zaerin as heir, and the human, Jareth Velian, as her chosen protector. Jareth turned slowly to Zaerin. She was staring at the screen, trembling. I never thought they'd... Then the Zinari flagship responded, not with words, but with weapons. Plasma surged across the void. The carrier opened fire not on the refugee ships, but directly at the Keeper vessel. The ancient truce shattered, and the battle began. Explosions lit the space between moons like the birth of suns. Ships danced and died in radiant bursts. The derelict ship housing the children remained untouched, as all sides now recognized it as sacred ground. But chaos reigned around it. Jareth flew the Wanderer into the heart of the storm, weaving between warring ships, dodging beams that could shear mountains. Beside him, Zaerin didn't flinch. She rerouted power, issued commands to the splintered Keeper vessels, still loyal to her mother's cause. Her voice cut through the static, like lightning. To all who would see peace, protect the young. Protect the truth. This is not a war for thrones. It is a reckoning. They became a symbol, human and alien, pilot and princess, charging into fire not with dominance, but with defiance. One by one, smaller Zinari ships broke formation and peeled away, refusing orders. Look, Jareth pointed. A Zinari destroyer turned and opened fire on its own flagship. Mutiny, rebellion, hope. On the bridge of the Tyrael flagship, Zaerin's uncle, a creature of silver eyes and ambition, watched it all. And for the first time in decades, he saw his future crumble. He activated the flagship's core. He's going to blow the whole thing, Zaerin realized. Take the entire battle down with him. Jareth didn't hesitate. Then we stop. Him. The Wanderer broke formation, hurtling toward the flagship as the countdown reached seconds. Inside, Jareth and Zaerin boarded via emergency breach. Hallways twisted in chaos. Fire, screaming metal. Loyalists tried to stop them. Failed. At the heart of the ship, they found the core, pulsing with violet heat, seconds from critical failure. Zaerin leapt onto the console. Her fingers flew. But it was Jareth who saw the final switch, buried under a biolock coded to House Tyrael. Only you can do it, he said. No, she whispered. Not unless I accept the throne. That's the only way to override it. Then, accept it. She looked up at him, sweat, blood, firelight painting her emerald skin. I don't want to rule. You don't have to, he said. But you do need to stop this. She pressed her palm to the interface. A second passed. The ship went still. The core shut down. The Zinari flagship went dark. Outside, the fighting stopped. A week later, aboard the Wanderer, Jareth stood at the viewport, sipping lukewarm coffee. Zarin joined him, dressed not in armor, but a soft grey robe of the Keeper's order. You're quiet, she said, just thinking about how strange life gets. 1 minute I'm making smart remarks to a grumpy alien girl with a fake name. Next thing I know, we're married and dismantling empires. She smiled. You never asked if I meant it. The marriage? She nodded. I didn't have to, he said. You stayed. She stepped closer. You said it yourself. I married you for a joke, a shield. But the truth is, she touched his hand. You guessed my name before I knew what yours meant to me. He pulled her close. So, what now, princess? She looked at the stars. We build something new. A place for the children, for others like them. And maybe, she added, a smile touching her lips, we make a few of our own. He blinked. That's forward. You married a royal, Jareth. We don't flirt. We command. He laughed. And kissed her. And somewhere, in a cradle of forgotten stars, 2 names whispered across the void, Zarin and Jareth, bound by choice, by war, by love. Not the end, just the beginning.